bankers in Kenya have been challenged to fully institutionalize corporate governance as a mandatory framework in order to sustainably run their businesses for years to come. Corporate governance is no longer a tenet that is embraced only when need arises. It is now mandated by law that banks in Kenya must run their businesses on the foundations of a strong corporate governance framework. Industry captains and senior executives drawn from the banking sector in Kenya recently gathered at the Serena Hotel for a breakfast event on corporate governance. The breakfast was organized by the Kenya Institute of Bankers in partnership with the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation and the Leadership Group. The keynote speaker at this high-level breakfast was Dr. Martin Otienno, the founder and executive director of the Leadership Group. During his presentation, he made case for a structured approach to corporate governance, whilst championing for boards and managements that took corporate governance with the seriousness it deserves. Dr. Otienno was first and foremost appreciative of the collaboration between the three entities to bring bankers together on a forum such as this.
So when we look at this collaboration, what do we see, or what do I see? Certainly, I'm looking, and Julius will probably talk to this a bit later, at bringing our different strengths together to support this industry. I spent 18 years in the banking sector myself, leaving at the end of 2012 as CEO of KCB Group, but having worked at Barclays and so on. Today I still remain in the sector because I sit on the board of Standard Bank Group, the parents of Stanbic Bank, so I sit at the Pan-African group level of Standard Bank, and so I continue to interact with the industry and with the developments in the industry. And therefore, when you look at what it is that KIB stands for, what is it that KDIC stands for, and what we stand for, I see that the partnership would bring a lot of value in just bringing all these resources together for the benefits. And also, given that a lot of institutions here in the banking sector are now regional and Pan-Africa in fact, that some of the work that we start doing here can also spread out across the region, so that the industry remains strong and effective. And given that regulators are working across the region and across the continent, it's actually important that collaborative arrangements such as this can then cut across the borders as well.
Dr. Otienno reminisced about the past challenges and failures that had visited the banking sector in Kenya, and in the process sought to frame the discussion around the need for learning and setting up structures that would breed better governance practices in the sector.
If we look at some of the history, and those of you who have been in this sector long enough, like Mahmoud, you realize some of the what has happened both in our country and elsewhere, and the responses that governments and regulators have had to that. You look at the developments coming out of the financial crisis across the world. You look at some of the government responses, you look at the regulatory responses in terms of core capital, you look at some of the supervisory developments across, including the supervisory colleges now, which are probably about 10 years old. But you also cannot fail to notice, as Mahmoud said, some of the troubles, the challenges that have been in this industry over the years. The objective is to have zero bank failures, but we know when we look back at the history, some of it, in fact, all of it very, very painful in the past, and hence I really support what Mahmoud says when he talks about zero failures in banks. The impact of that on the stakeholders is something that you don't wish on your worst enemy. And so even if we look at more recently, what has happened with some of the more recent bank troubles over the last 5 years, again, you come to the same conclusion that this is something that we must avoid at all costs. And part of avoiding this is just adopting this learning culture where we are constantly thinking about what's the best and how do we improve governance, how do we improve leadership, how to become the best How do we become role models in our own institutions and as individuals as well? And so in our own industry here as bankers, ethical leadership is what helps us avoid some of the temptations and some of the bad governance practices that we've seen in the past. In fact, when you summarize, when you look at the ICF Code of Corporate Governance and you look at the pillars of corporate governance, they pull out the four. In particular, they pull out fairness, they pull out accountability, they pull out responsibility, they pull out transparency as the pillars of corporate governance, the four critical pillars of corporate governance. And if you look at those and try and double click on them, then you'll find that, as you reflect on those, then you're actually at the heart of corporate governance.
He also tackled the challenges and emerging issues that the industry needed to combat as a matter of principle.
Some of the emerging issues, which again institutions have now got to deal with much more than in the past, is this whole issue of ESG and green finance. And inside there you can throw climate change and everything to do with that. But you can actually look at the E, the S, and the G differently and disaggregate them and start thinking about what it is that as banks we can do in that space.
The Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation, which sponsored the event, was well represented in the breakfast. The CEO of KDIC, Mr. Mohammed Ahmed Mohammed, informed participating banks that as they put in place good governance structures, deposits belonging to clients needed the utmost safeguarding in order to ensure banks do not collapse. Good governance, he said, was the key ingredient to ensure this practice of keeping safe clients' money is institutionalized.
I think you'll all agree with me that once we have a strong, I give it about the 4 S's, strong, sound, safe and sustainable banking system in this country, the skies shall be the limit. And I think we all know that banking is the nerve center of a country's financial sector, isn't it? So KDIC, who is KDIC? KDIC was previously a Department of Central Bank. Now we are a state corporation driving 3 key mandates. And our mandate is called a risk minimizer. We breathe risk and we sleep risk because we believe in and we are also a resolution authority. And ladies and gentlemen, our journey going forward is to resolve banks. Indeed, we have a mantra called 0 bank failures in Kenya. Because I always tell the bankers that as much as you are a private institution, you are holding a very critical public asset called what? Deposits. That bank does not belong to Mohammed, it belongs to the Wanjikos, Fatumas and the Otiennos. So please make sure you jealously guard those deposits because our mothers, sisters, brothers, uncles and everybody wants to sacrifice to save for a rainy day. Corporate governance now fits in very well. Make sure you jealously guard those deposits because it belongs to your own people. It does not belong to anybody else.
Mr. Mohammed provided crucial highlights to the mandate of KDIC, which gels critically with the key role that corporate governance plays in any banking institution.
So we have 3 mandates. The first mandate, which is to provide a deposit insurance, where we recently revised our coverage from 100,000 to 500,000. Then our second mandate is to provide sound incentives for sound risk management. And that is where we want to spend most of our resources and time on. When anybody asks me, Mohammed, what is the main cause of bank failure? I know Martin will be happy to hear this. I always tell them it's either lack or poor corporate governance, period. If you address corporate governance, we shall not have bank failures in this country. They tell you, oh, there is liquidity risk, oh, there is this risk. But if you look at all those risks, it's governance. Okay? Because if governance speaks to those risks, we shall identify, we shall treat, we shall manage, we shall evaluate, and we shall monitor, isn't it? So our message to the bankers is please address these things so that we can all have a very strong, sound, stable, and strong bank, isn't it? Our third mandate is to promptly resolve problem banking. We want to see the assets in these banks. We want banks to have very good assets, that in the unlikely event of a problem, we can quickly resolve that bank without closing any door. Going forward, we don't want to close any door of any bank. That is our future. But that doesn't mean that I'm telling you today to go and just involve yourself in some moral hazard because it's a KDIC said we shall not close any bank. If you mismanage it so bad, we'll close the bank. But all of us must work towards ensuring that we don't close our bank, because closure of a bank affects the cardinal tenets of a state, which is lives and properties, isn't it? Because it affects our lives, it affects our businesses. Even you as a banker, it affects your own job. Okay? So that is why I always put this message across. Please make sure you play your effective role very well. Okay? Wherever you are, even that teller there, make sure you are paying the right person. Make sure nobody is holding a gun on your head telling you pay Muhammad when you're supposed to pay Martin. Okay? Please safeguard these deposits. And that is our message to you.
At the end of the day, when it was all said and done, the breakfast came to a remarkable conclusion, with bankers vowing to implement the knowledge they had acquired during the event to good measure in their own establishments. Some of the participants, and the team that played a crucial role in planning and executing the event, were on hand to offer their thoughts on the value that had been acquired during the breakfast. Here are some of their unique thoughts and expressions of satisfaction.
All right, first of all, I want to thank the Kenya Institute of Bankers for this great event, the Kenya Deposit Insurance Corporation as well, because these are very topical issues that need to be discussed. The trainings cannot be enough, it can be too much, because corporate governance is at the heart of business sustainability. You know, so it's very fundamental that all executives, all industry practitioners, the board members are aware of these topical issues and the need for everybody to be committed to delivering more on this. For us as UBA, building a Pan-African bank is very critical, and the foundation of it is corporate governance. So from the much of lessons that we have taken from this place, all we just need to go back is to go back, put it into practice, make the whole team understand that, look, for there to be a UBA tomorrow, we need to build very solid foundations and implement all of this going forward. Learning is very critical because most of issues stemming from corporate governance are topical issues, and even new issues are going to be coming up tomorrow. So constant learning and development is at the heart of it, and we'll put structures in place to ensure that both starting from the board down to the management team to the members of staff, we all key into this and know that, look, this is the way forward.
This has been an amazing event actually, especially looking at the background of where banks are coming from. Very many corporate failures that are related to kind of governance issues, and therefore having this discussion this particular morning and having people giving their views around what areas are emerging, where there have been maybe failures in the past and where they are going. This has become a good discussion, and a couple of things have come out, therefore, to see how this space is going to be strengthened. We are seeing emerging areas like climate change in relation to governance, ESG items, cybersecurity, things that actually are very pertinent for the banking sector if they are managed well. Therefore, this breakfast has given those snippets that will then in future inspire what areas board should look at in their trainings. Management teams can view those kind of new and emerging areas and have that conversation deep and refocus their training needs. So it's amazing and beautiful. So TLG, we are proud to be part of this, and we hope we can add value to the banking sector, make it more stable, as we said, probably to a zero failure rate as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Today I had the pleasure to attend the breakfast meeting organized by KIB in conjunction with KDIC and the leadership group. It was really an amazing session where my key takeaway was basically the importance of corporate governance in organizations. And moving forward, I'm going to interact with my team, the management, and the senior leadership to ensure that corporate governance is taken seriously. I also learned the benefit of corporate governance trainings to ensure that leaders are empowered. And this was really amazing because we are going to look at that moving forward at Rafiki.
I've learned a lot in this event in regards to corporate governance, and especially on sustainability and why we need to grow sustainable business, because we live in a world that is full of uncertainty and the only constant thing is change. And I look forward to having more of such events. I would appreciate if KIB would have events on cybersecurity, fintechs, so that we're able to also manage the future, the innovations that are coming up in the banking sector. So thank you very much, and I'm glad to have been here, I've networked, and I look forward to more of such events. Thank you, KIB.
The issue of corporate governance, this was a very important event here today. The manner in which companies are directed and controlled is actually not even becoming, has been a critical issue, actually, when it comes to how companies are going to determine their structure, how they're going to, the oversight, their committees, etc. Basically, how companies are run is critical. It's critical, and especially so within the financial services industry, the banking industry, the critical role that the banking industry plays. It is absolutely essential that they are run in an appropriate manner. That tone from the top, board structure, especially now corporate governance basically is driven, it's an initiative driven by the board, is critical towards not only firms in particular, but the industry as a whole.
My name is Angela Wamboy, and I had the pleasure of being the moderator for this morning's breakfast session, which was brought to you by KIB, and of course our sponsors, KDIC, alongside our other partners, the leadership group. And it was amazing because we got to hear from our keynote speaker, who is none other than Dr. Martin Otienno, and he had some really, really wise words with someone who has been in the industry for decades. You know, he gave us insight into his journey, and at the end of the day, one thing that I did take away from him is it's just not enough for us to be consumers of good governance, but we also have to be co-creators of good governance. And I think with the diversity of the institutions that were in the room, to our corporate members, we really encourage you and challenge you to be co-creators of good governance and to spread that. And that's what's going to make our sector stronger, not just in Kenya, but the region and the whole continent at large.
Last but not least, it was the turn of the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Institute of Bankers, Mr. Julius Alego, to reflect on the event. The KIB team had worked tirelessly over the course of 2 months to organize and execute this event, thanks to the leadership of Mr. Julius Alego.
This is one of the events that we had highlighted this year because of the core nature of corporate governance within the financial institutions and banking specifically. To this extent, we got the partnership of the Kenya Depository Insurance Company, KDIC, who also appreciated the fact that corporate governance is one of their key pillars. On the other hand, we sourced out for a partner who can then help us in demystifying corporate governance. And this came in the form of the leadership group headed by Dr. Martin Otienno. So that's how we came together and thought of this breakfast, more of a high-level activity to ensure that the bankers and our corporate sponsors basically appreciate what corporate governance is all about. The next step, obviously, is for us then to bring this down to bespoke institutions, the banks themselves and financial institutions. So one of the key areas that we are taking up as the next steps is to ensure that there is internal discussions and continuous discussions with the leadership group and our individual banks to build up the corporate governance culture within their banks. This will entail, amongst other things, training of their boards, training of their senior executive staff, but more importantly, we want to look at the bigger picture, which is building the culture. And building the culture there would mean, amongst other things as well, other than training, is to do assessment of the boards, to look at their, for example, their succession plans,
to look at the risk management areas as well. So we're looking at the entirety of corporate governance. So there's a lot more that is coming our way and the way of our corporate members, and we look forward to a lot more cooperation and partnership towards this end.